In 1909, an Arizona newspaper reported a discovery that should have rewritten human history. An underground city carved into solid rock deep inside the Grand Canyon, filled with mummies, copper weapons, and an idol that looked like it belonged in an Egyptian temple. And then, within weeks, the story vanished. The Smithsonian was named as the sponsor. The site was never opened to the public. No photographs were ever printed. The world eventually called it a hoax and moved on. But the Hopi, whose ancestors have lived beside that canyon for 1,000 years, never treated it as a joke. They issued a different kind of warning. They said they already knew what was down there, and they said they knew exactly why it was never meant to be found. To understand why this one story refuses to die, you have to start with the canyon itself, because most people picture it wrong. They picture a single open valley. But the Grand Canyon is honeycombed. Its cliffs, especially in the red wall limestone, are riddled with natural cave systems. And even today, more than a century into the age of satellites and drones, huge sections of those cliffs have never been fully mapped or explored. It is one of the most photographed places on Earth, and it is still, in the most literal sense, full of holes we have never looked inside. So when a man rode out of that canyon in 1909, claiming he had found a doorway 2,000 feet up a sheer rock wall, the story was strange, but it was not impossible. And what he said was inside that doorway is where this stops being an ordinary adventure tale. Let's start with him. His name was G.E. Kincaid, and according to the Arizona Gazette, he was no amateur. He was described as an explorer who had worked with the Smithsonian for years, and he had just completed something almost nobody had done, a solo boat trip down the entire Colorado River, from Green River, Wyoming, all the way to Yuma, Arizona, in a wooden boat. The first mention of him is small, buried in the paper on March 12th. Just a note that a river explorer had returned with some interesting archaeological discoveries and over 700 photographs. Then, 24 days later, on April 5th, the Gazette gave the story the entire front page. And the details were staggering. Kincaid said that about 42 miles upstream from the main tourist area, 2,000 feet above the water on an almost vertical cliff, he had found a cut entrance leading into the rock. Inside, he described a main passage running back nearly a mile, with dozens of chambers branching off it in every direction. He described granaries still holding preserved seed. He described copper tools and weapons, hardened in a way that the article claimed modern science could not easily reproduce. He described tablets covered in hieroglyphics, and he described rows of mummies, hundreds of them, laid out in the chambers. But the single detail that made this story explode was the shrine. Kincaid said that at the heart of the complex sat a large idol, cross-legged, holding a flower like a lotus, in a pose that reminded him of Buddha, or of the seated gods of Egypt. And that is the detail we need to stop on, because it opens a door that leads straight to the Hopi. Because the obvious question is the one the article itself asked. Why would an Egyptian-style shrine with an Asian-style idol be sealed inside a cliff in Arizona? The newspaper's answer was that an ancient race of Oriental origin had somehow crossed the world and settled in the canyon. And for 100 years, skeptics have used that exact claim to laugh the whole thing off, because there is no evidence Egyptians ever reached North America. But the Hopi were telling a story about that canyon long before 1909, and it does not require anyone to sail across an ocean. Because in the Hopi account, the ancient ones did not come from across the sea, they came from below. The Hopi say that humanity has lived through more than one world, and that each earlier world ended in catastrophe. And each time, before the destruction, the people were led underground for shelter, into a network of chambers and tunnels beneath the earth. They were sheltered there, the oldest traditions say, by beings who already lived below the surface. The Hopi call them the ant people. And here is where the hair on your neck should start to rise. Because the ant people are not described as insects, they are remembered as intelligent beings who lived in underground chambers and knew the world beneath the surface. And in some accounts, they are described as taller than ordinary people. In others, as covered in hair. Now hold that beside the newspaper. A hidden complex of chambers and tunnels deep inside the canyon, filled with the remains of an ancient people. and an indigenous tradition far older than that newspaper, describing exactly that, an underground world full of chambers beneath the very same canyon. Two completely separate sources, one printed in 1909, one passed down for centuries before it, both pointing at the same place. And it gets deeper, because to the Hopi, this is not a story about buried treasure. It is a story about a door. To the Hopi, the Grand Canyon is not an archaeological site. It is the location of the Sipapu. The Sipapu is the sacred opening, the place of emergence, the exact point where the Hopi ancestors climbed up out of the world below and into this one, the world we are living in now. It is, in the most literal sense the Hopi can express, a doorway between worlds. And that reframes the entire 1909 story. Because if you believe the Hopi tradition, then those chambers were never just old rooms, they were the threshold, the place where our world touches the one we left behind. And the Hopi warning has always carried an edge to it. They have long held that certain places inside that canyon are sacred and are not to be disturbed, not because of superstition, but because disturbing the threshold, thinning the veil between the world above and the world below, was understood to be dangerous. So look at what the Smithsonian was accused of doing through that lens. If the story is true, then a government institution did not just seal a cave to hide some artifacts. According to this reading, they sealed a doorway. They tried to contain something they did not understand and could not explain, and then they made sure the public would never get close enough to ask. And whether or not you believe a single word of that, the historical timing is genuinely strange, because just 3 years before that article, in 1906, the Antiquities Act had become law. It gave the federal government direct authority over major discoveries on federal land, and the Grand Canyon was already federal land. So if a discovery of that magnitude had truly been made there, it would have fallen under federal control automatically, by law. Which means the one thing believers and skeptics can actually agree on is this: if that cave was real, the government would have had both the authority and the legal obligation to take control of it. And that fact is exactly what makes the modern silence so loud. A lot of hidden history channels ask you to just take their word for it. I don't. I put 18 of these stories into a book called What They Tried to Bury, and at the end of every chapter, you'll find the receipts, every treaty date, every court ruling, every government report, cited so you can check them yourself. It's all the sources in one place, and the link is in the description if you want to see the paper trail behind stories exactly like this one. Now let's talk about the part of this that is happening right now. Because here's what troubles even careful people. Large stretches of that canyon, including the deep country around Marble Canyon and the more remote river corridors, are heavily restricted. Access is tightly controlled. Certain zones are effectively off limits to the public, and portions of the airspace are restricted as well. Now, there are ordinary reasons for that. Fragile ecosystems, protected bat caves, dangerous terrain, sacred sites that indigenous nations have asked to keep private. Every one of those is a legitimate explanation. But researchers who have gone looking keep circling the same uncomfortable question. Why are some of the most protected, least accessible coordinates in the entire Southwest clustered around the very stretch of river the 1909 article pointed to? If there is truly nothing out there, why is it so difficult to get near? And then there is the Smithsonian's own answer, which is stranger the longer you look at it. Their position is simple and total. No record of G.E. Kincaid, no record of a Professor Jordan, no record of any expedition, no cave, no artifacts, nothing. And skeptics make a fair point. The article even calls it the Smithsonian Institute, which is the wrong name. The correct name is the Smithsonian Institution, and a genuine insider might not have gotten that wrong. But flip it around. That total denial is doing a lot of heavy lifting for a story this detailed. The Gazette describes specific distances, specific artifacts, specific numbers, 700 photographs, 42 miles upstream, a mile of tunnels, and it named a sponsor and a lead scientist. And the newspaper never once, in over 116 years, printed a retraction. So the question is not really whether the cave is exactly as described. The question researchers keep asking is narrower and sharper. Were the people who issued that flat denial ever actually in a position to know what was or wasn't found out there? Because a missing record and a buried record look identical from the outside. And this is where the two halves of the story finally close together. The Hopi say we are living at the end of the fourth world. They say that as this world winds down, the old doorways, the thresholds between this world and the one below, begin to loosen again. They warned that these places should be left sealed, left undisturbed, precisely because of what a thinning veil might allow through. The Smithsonian, if you believe the 1909 account, tried to answer that warning with concrete and silence. But you cannot pour concrete over a prophecy. And that is the thought this whole story leaves you sitting with. History has handed us fragments, a real newspaper, a total government denial, a canyon full of thousands of unexplored caves, and an indigenous tradition, older than the state of Arizona itself, describing an underground world and a doorway beneath that exact canyon. None of those fragments, on its own, proves the Citadel was real. But laid side by side, they refuse to let the question die. Maybe one day, new technology, high-resolution scanning, advanced cave mapping, will finally settle it. Or maybe the answer was never hidden in the rock at all. Maybe it was always held in the memory of the people who knew that landscape long before any newspaper, any government survey, or any national park. So I want to hear from you. If you've spent time in that deep canyon country, if you've seen the restricted zones, the closed roads, the no trespassing signs where officially there is nothing to protect, tell me what you saw in the comments, because those first-hand accounts are the part the official record never includes. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe and stick around, because there are plenty more doorways nobody wants you looking behind. And if you want the full paper trail, every source, every citation, every buried document behind stories like this one, it's all in What They Tried to Bury, linked below. I'll see you in the next investigation.